Well, hello there. My name is Ian, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Obviously, we are well into the month of December, which is the month of Frank Zappa's birth. And for many people, most people, I would say, December is all about the holidays, whatever you may celebrate. But to Frank Zappa fans, it's Zappadan. And Zappadan means that all month we are not listening to Christmas music. We are listening to Frank Zappa music. And as you may well know, there is quite a lot of Frank Zappa music. And it dawned on me that there might still be some folks out there, maybe younger folks or even older folks who just never got around to hearing much Frank Zappa, who might be wondering where to start in this immense and ever-expanding catalog. And believe me, it is always expanding. So I hope with this video to provide a couple of options for those of you who are interested, or maybe you've just explored a couple of Frank Zappa albums or even songs. And obviously, your starting point is going to very much depend on you and what kind of music that you like. So I've picked 10 or so records that I think are as good as any place to start. And I'm going to try and just talk about each one and maybe, depending on, again, like where you are and what you're into, this might provide an easy guide for you getting into this incredible world of fantastic music. So up first, I grabbed the debut album, Freak Out. And, there's no better place to start than the very beginning. This was Frank's very first album, composed of a lot of songs that he had been working on over the years up until this point. This was 1966. A very important album in rock music, as depending on what source you read, it either is the first or it's one of the first double albums in rock. Whether it's a concept album or not is arguable, although the Beatles thought it was. John Lennon and Paul McCartney both admired this record and mentioned it as an influence on the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album. Now, that's going to come back, so, stick around. Now, this version that I have here in front is a remix from the late 80s, I want to say. If you want to hear the original 1966 mix, you have to get the Mother's Freak Out Project Object CD. And I don't know if this is still in print, but I do believe it is on streaming. But this is the only way to hear the original mix. Now, next year is the 60th anniversary of Freak Out, 2026. And I would imagine that some sort of anniversary release is on the horizon. So keep your eye out for that if you're interested in Freak Out. Freak Out, to me, it just, what makes this album special is that it has everything on it. From great songs, searing political satire, songs like Hungry Freaks Daddy, or even Who Are the Brain Police, but it also has just some terrific songs like Go Cry on Somebody Else's Shoulder, or even I'm Not Satisfied, You Didn't Try to Call Me, Wowie Zowie. Now, this is a rather groundbreaking album in the fact that the entire fourth side is really where the album gets its name from, as this is a total freak out, experimental piece of music. And I think of this as ground zero for Frank's work, because it seems like he kind of maps out everything he was going to do with the rest of his career on this first album. And I really can't think of many debut albums that are able to be a thesis statement quite in the way that Freak Out is. So I had considered going chronologically, but instead I'm going to jump ahead to what I think is just a good all-around starting place. Now, as is common with Frank, he would often release two albums in a row that were kind of similar. And I like to think of them as sister albums. And oftentimes they were recorded around the same time, but not always. These weren't, although some folks erroneously say that they were. And I'm talking about Apostrophe and Over-nite Sensation. Of the two of them, I think that Apostrophe is the slightly better starting place. You open up with what is Frank Zappa's, perhaps his best known song, Don't Eat the Yellow Snow, and one of the few, I think, hit songs he had. But the album version, the full length version, takes up almost the entirety of side one. And it's a real treat. It's got all the humor. It's got the great playing. I do know a lot of my subscribers are progressive rock fans. And I think that especially this first side is an example of Frank dipping his toes into the progressive rock genre. So you can't go wrong with this one. Again, it's got the humor, it's got great songs, but most of all, it's got accessibility. And this was my first Frank Zappa album. And when I heard it for the first time, it was absolutely unlike anything I'd ever heard before, but it was also strangely familiar. I found it was like coming from another universe, but at the same time, it was very relatable. So I would recommend this as a solid, just all-around starting point for just about anybody. And as I mentioned, this is very much a sister album. The version that I heard first actually was a CD that had both of these albums on one disc. So they're kind of connected in my mind, and similar era, similar bands, although not exact same bands. It's the same band, I believe, on side one of Apostrophe, but side two of Apostrophe is a little different. But yeah, again, this is another one of Frank's most accessible records, with Camarillo Brillo being kind of like a country and western thing. But you also get some searing guitar work with songs like I'm the Slime, and again, sort of the socio-political commentary. But a song that I've always loved from this album is Zombie Wolf. It's just a great funk rock, jazz, modern classical thrown in there with a great vocal from Ricky Lancelotti, sort of tying it all together. But yeah, you can't go wrong with either one of these. You have Dynamo Hum here, which is one of Frank's most infamous songs, and the very memorable Montana, which is a huge fan favorite, and a song that he played a lot over the years. So an album that I think is a terrific starting point, although maybe not as easy or accessible as those other two, is this record, One Size Fits All. Originally released in 1975, it was kind of a cap on that whole era that I was just talking about. And in a moment, we'll discuss this album, which came out in between them. But One Size Fits All, I think, is the perfect title for it, because it is a great introductory point into Frank's music. A song like Inca Roads, I think you could just sort of play that for somebody, as it encapsulates all of what makes Frank Zappa great, from the compositions, the humor, a great guitar solo, great keyboard solo from George Duke, wonderful singing, and just an all-around outstanding track. And it is very progressive, in my opinion. Again, if you are a progressive rock fan, as many of my subscribers are, you can't go wrong with Inca Roads. It is maybe, in my humble opinion, the ultimate statement on so-called progressive rock. And just about everything else pales in comparison to me. But in addition to that, you get a lot of really great songs on this album. And many of them lean towards kind of the blues rock idiom. Songs like Can't Afford No Shoes, Pajama People, which is, another stellar guitar solo. And of course, San Bernardino is a heavy blues rock number. But you also get the incredibly odd Florentine Pogan, which is strangely an earworm for me. And it's very heavy and kind of menacing, but again, very light in its humor. So, you have Frank balancing all of these extremes. A song like Andy is just so compositionally tasty. You can't go wrong. And if that doesn't make you want to check this out, you've also got one of Frank's best ever compositions on here twice, and that's Sofa. Sofa 1 and Sofa number 2. That song actually brings a tear to my eye at times. It's just so delicate and beautiful. And those aren't necessarily adjectives that I would use to describe many songs in Frank's discography. So really special record here, and you can't go wrong with this one. Now, I alluded to there being a record in between Apostrophe and One Size Fits All, and I was talking about Roxy and Elsewhere. And this is a great starting point if you're interested in live Zappa and hearing what his bands could pull off on stage. And indeed, this is just wall-to-wall great compositions. The whole middle section where you go from Village of the Sun, which is one of my favorite Frank songs and melodies, it's just kind of like a simplistic little nostalgic thing. But you jump immediately to Echidna's Arf of You and Don't You Ever Wash That Thing, which are just masterclasses in ingenuity, musical ingenuity, and clever arrangement and writing, composition, performance. Everything here is just the stuff of legends. And there is a film, so you might seek out the film Roxy the movie, which is on streaming. That might be a decent entry point because you get to see Frank live. And there is so much of these shows that are visual in nature, such as the Bebop Tango of the Jazzmen's Church. That track doesn't necessarily translate well on the album, but when you see it on the video, it makes a lot more sense. You also have Frank's love letter to monster movies, Cheapness, and kind of whenever Frank does any kind of homage to old monster movies, he captures my heart. So I can't recommend this one highly enough. Maybe I would start with one or two of these other ones, but this isn't a bad place if you're interested in what his bands were like live. And it's a legendary album, Roxy and Elsewhere. So these next two are recommendations if you're not so much into vocal music, if you prefer the instrumental side. And I particularly understand this for people getting into Frank Zappa, because I know some people are put off by the humor or the funny lyrics. But these two albums here are great examples of Frank when he just went totally instrumental, with a few caveats here. So Hot Rats, which is maybe the first proper Frank Zappa solo album, although Lumpy Gravy technically is. This was Frank breaking away from the Mothers for the first time and kind of getting a group of great jazz rock players together and mixing compositions that he had written out with some spontaneous jams in the studio. And he would implement the editing process, which was done with a razor blade and tape in those days. This was pre-digital, to aid in his composition. So the studio became a compositional tool. And that is a theme with his earlier work as well. But this is a great place to start because, again, it is mostly instrumental. Willie the Pimp features memorable vocals from Captain Beefheart, but they only take up about the first 3 minutes of the song, and it's a 9-minute song. So if you aren't much into vocals, you can kind of easily fast forward through that, although I wouldn't advise it because I think Captain Beefheart's vocal performance is terrific. But this does have one of Frank's all-time iconic compositions, Peaches and Regalia, a beautiful piece of music. I absolutely love Peaches and Regalia. But the rest of the record is fantastic too. I mentioned Willie the Pimp with that epic guitar solo, Son of Mr. Green Jeans, which is kind of a remake of a song called Mr. Green Jeans from the Uncle Meat album. Little Umbrellas is a crucially underrated tune, in my opinion. And you also get the Gumbo Variations, which is a jazz saxophone workout. But I recommend this album not just because of its accessibility and the fact that it's an instrumental album, but also because this is where Frank really begins to develop as a guitar player. So if you are a fan of guitar work, guitar players, you can't go wrong with this album. I think this is going to inspire you a great deal. Hot Rats. So in 1972, Frank released 2 jazz rock influenced albums, and they kind of pick up on the themes of the Hot Rats album after he went on like a rock and roll binge with 2 members of the Turtles. But for many people, this was a return to form, although I do love that Flo and Eddie era. I just wouldn't necessarily recommend it to newbies because the humor in it is quite it's special. Let's just say that. But this is another almost entirely instrumental record. The only vocal song on this, well, 2 vocal songs on this, for Calvin and his next 2 hitchhikers, and Cletus Auritus Auritus. But the Grand Wazoo is kind of like a boogie, like boogie jazz blues tune, with lots of solos. There's even one moment that sounds like Pink Floyd's Money, and this is a year before Money, so that's kind of a remarkable thing. For Calvin is a weird song, and I will say that I'm a huge fan of it. Not necessarily one that you're going to maybe appreciate right away. It might take a couple listens to unravel, but Eat That Question is a riff monster. It's a total rock tune. And this has one of Frank's most sensitive melodies on it with Blessed Relief. I would put that next to Sofa on the One Size Fits All album as being one of the most beautiful pieces that he's ever written. So you can't go wrong with this one, especially if you love jazz, improvisation. This is a great place to start. So I'm just going to hold up these 3 and kind of talk about them. These albums are great if you like the humor, if that's something that draws you in, if you like Frank's voice. I think these are great albums. So first up, I'll talk a little bit about Sheik Yerbouti from 1979. This is one that's perhaps the most infamous because it contains a couple of songs that aren't the most politically correct, depending on what era we're living in, but are the ones that perhaps he's most known for. And there's a few of those on Joe's Garage as well. This is a double album, but it's a very rock-oriented record, and I find it very accessible because it's sort of centered around the songs more than the compositions. Now, as you get deeper into it, there are some really great compositions. Wild Love, I think, is a great Zappa song. City of Tiny Lights, I think, is a great Zappa song. But yeah, this is Frank at his most consciously humorous. So if that's your thing, this is probably a good place to start. You also have this, Joe's Garage, which is a rock opera about a dystopian future in which the government has made music illegal. And, that may not sound like a fun time, but it actually is. And the reason why I recommend it for a newbie is that even though it is quite long, it's 2 discs on CD or 3 discs on vinyl, Frank talks about, in some of the interviews around this album, about how he was trying to go for a more straight-ahead compositional style, songwriting style, because it fit the narrative. He was very interested when making this album in the narrative of it, and even went so far to hire Peter Wolf on keyboards as somebody who could just hold down a pretty traditional keyboard role. Not somebody like Tommy Mars, who could be quite flashy and full of personality. He wanted something a little bit more straightforward and in service of the songs. The first disc, I think, is one of the most accessible things he's ever done. It gets a little bit hairier as you get to the second and third acts, which is why I'm kind of recommending it near the end of the video. But it does have some of Frank's most iconic songs, like Catholic Girls, which, I know some people find it offensive, but I actually still kind of smile at that song. So Joe's Garage, not a bad place. And then this is one that perhaps isn't mentioned too often, but I think You Are What You Is. You could kind of copy and paste just about everything I said about the last 2 albums and use it to describe this one as well. It's interesting in that it's organized into kind of side-length suites that have a theme. So again, if you are a progressive rock fan, you might find something to enjoy about this. But vocally, it's very strong, with Ike Willis and Ray White featured very heavily. And I think it's kind of an underdog. I mean, there is the humor, but I think that the humor is balanced by great songwriting and great melodies. So yeah, I don't know if this is, again, like a lot of this depends on who you are and what your interests are. But I think you can't really go wrong with this one. And it's even one that people who don't necessarily enjoy some of the later Zappa stuff will say, you know what, though, You Are What You Is good. And that's a that's a point of view I would support. So finally, I'm going to talk about the perhaps least accessible album on this list, but maybe the finest, maybe the greatest album on this list. And that is We're Only in It for the Money from 1968. Now, this is obviously a parody of the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and the title We're Only in It for the Money is kind of a snide jab at the Beatles. I think he was deliberately antagonizing them, and that's fine. You know, I find that stuff fun. I just don't get in the middle of it. You know, I like the Beatles. I like Frank Zappa. There's room in my heart for both. Now, why I'm talking about this album, it's one of Frank's most creative. It mixes, again, great songwriting with tape experimentation, stuff that he would explore further on albums like Lumpy Gravy, which was actually before this, as well as Uncle Meat, which would be after this. So you kind of mix the songwriting, the doo-wop parodies, the scathing social satire with songs like Who Needs the Peace Corps or Concentration Moon, Mom and Dad, with, you know, really irreverent and humorous things. You know, there's a reason why this has been preserved by the Library of Congress, I feel it's a nice snapshot of late 60s American history. And it's one of Frank Zappa's finest albums. For many people I know who are huge Frank Zappa fans, this is their favorite. And it's definitely one of mine. I just wouldn't start here necessarily. I would make this maybe your second or third listen, just because the nature of the way that it's constructed, again, with all those tape edits and strange experimental sounds, it may not be the easiest one to appreciate right away. And I know that when I first heard it, I was very much put off by it. But after a couple of listens, it sunk its teeth into me and I fell in love. And years later, I might point to this as my all-time favorite Frank Zappa album. If you are interested in hearing an overview of Frank Zappa, I have prepared 2 lengthy radio shows which will air on ProgRadio. The first one, The Life and Times of Frank Zappa, will air on Wednesday, December 17th at noon Eastern Time, and it will be available in the echo chamber on the website for you to listen to. So if you're watching this video, I think it's going to come out actually after the 17th. So if you're watching this after the fact, you can go to the echo chamber and hear it. So the concept of Life and Times on ProgRadio is a semi-comprehensive overview of an artist's career. Obviously, this was a very difficult and challenging thing to do for Frank. And when I set out to do it, I ended up with about 5 hours of material, because I wanted to cover everything. And after racking my brain, I finally decided to group the songs as thematic material. And this allowed me very easily to make a first 2-hour show and then a second 3-hour show. So after Wednesday, you're going to be able to hear the first show, the Life and Times show, which will be a 2-hour program. And then this Friday, there's going to be a follow-up, an encore Life and Times episode, which will be 3 hours long, and it will air during my underlying theme time slot. That second one, I think, is even better. And for instance, I play half of the Apostrophe album. So if that's one that's interesting to you, you might want to go check that out. Don't forget to let me know your thoughts. If you're coming to this as a seasoned Frank Zappa fan and you were just curious, let me know what albums you would recommend to a newbie. If you are new and Zappa curious, and you have a chance to go listen to something or listen to my radio programs, let me know in the comments below what you think of whatever it is you decide to listen to. I would love to get a dialogue here started in appreciation of the composer's great works. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I will hopefully be doing more Frank Zappa related content in the near future, but mostly on this channel I talk about physical media and new box sets and reissues that are coming out. But I also love Dolby Atmos and surround sound, so I do a lot of those kind of reviews. Yeah, until then, take care, and we'll talk real soon. All right, bye-bye.